All right, so as a review, this is what the website looks like. We had two models in this website. There was a horse model and a breed model, and they were related by way of a one-to-many association. So these are the breeds, and each breed has many horses. And so if I click into one, we can see each of the horses is listed here. We also implemented a simple search there. And right now, all of this information gets into the site by way of a seed script. And so if I go to here, it's just a very simple seed script that initially destroys all the data in those two models and then creates, at least right now, 5 breeds, and then for each breed, 15 horses, and it just does that all by Faker. What I want to add is a place where one or more administrators could log in to have full CRUD access to all of this information, which would mirror sort of content management style websites that are very common on the internet, right? You have all sorts of websites where the information is fairly static from a user's point of view. They're only visiting the website to see the information, but there are administrators that have access to add or update or delete information. So that's what we want to add here. And we're going to use a particular gem. There's a few different gems that could do this. We can go to the Ruby Toolbox website, which is a website for evaluating different gems, and it does so algorithmically. It just looks at their GitHub repositories, and it sort of looks at how often the gems are being added to, and how many issues they have, and how many stars they have, and how many downloads, all those kind of things. And you can see for the style of Rails admin interfaces, the gem with the highest rating is one called ActiveAdmin. It's been around for a large number of years. It's still actively maintained. I've used it on commercial applications in my own consulting work. Students have used it for many years now in this course. It's very easy to use, and it comes with full login capabilities. So once you have ActiveAdmin installed, you also have something called Devise installed in your system, which does all of the sort of username and password authentication things that you would expect an app to do, including like forgot password stuff and yeah, sort of all of those things that come with authentication. So there is a website, ActiveAdmin. And if we go to the documentation, it'll walk us through the steps that we need to install it in our application. And those steps start with us going to our gem file and adding a gem, in this case, the ActiveAdmin gem. And so I will close a few files here. And I will go to my gem file. And sort of below where the sort of the pre-included gems are, but above where gems are starting to be grouped into different groups, I'm going to put a new line there around line 32. And I'm going to say gem ActiveAdmin. And that is the admin dashboard gem. And we also want Devise, and we're going to use that for authentication. Authentication gem. And ActiveAdmin supports other ways of doing both authentication and authorization, but this is the one that is that I'm most familiar with, and I think Devise is still a gem that a lot of people in the Ruby community use when they need authentication. And it's something that a lot of students use in the second project in this course, where it's the e-commerce project, which requires not only an administrative dashboard, but also you can get marks for allowing customers to have login access. And so that you don't have to implement all of that login stuff yourself, you can just use the Devise gem to do that. So with those two things added to our gem file, I've got the server running already. I'm going to stop the server. And the reason is that ActiveAdmin is a Rails engine. So it's a whole version of a Rails website that you sort of bolt onto your site. And so the reason I need to stop the server is that the server needs to be restarted once you add an engine to Rails. And often it's just good practice to restart the server when adding new gems to Rails in general. So I'll do a bundle install to get those gems into my system. And you can see here, there's ActiveAdmin having been added, and Devise will be in here somewhere as well. Somewhere in that list will be Devise. And then I can start the server up again. Next up, with ActiveAdmin installed, we get a new generator. So normally the generators that we use are ones that have been provided by Rails, but now we have a generator that's been provided by ActiveAdmin. And so we can go to command prompt and we can say Rails G for generate active_admin : install. And so although the gem's name is ActiveAdmin one word, they weren't so consistent there. So when we actually do the task of the generator, it's active_admin. So it's going to do a few things. It's going to create some new folders for us. It's going to create a new migration for us, which is going to set up some new tables that are going to be required by ActiveAdmin. Specifically, the most important of those tables is the admin users table. So that's where username and passwords are going to be stored. And so knowing that we have some new migrations in our system, we're going to do a Rails DB migrate to run those migrations. The other thing, if we looked in this list here of things that ActiveAdmin did when we ran that generator, is we would see that it made a change to our seed script. So if we look into our seed script and we look at the bottom of the seed script, there's a new line that's been added, which is going to a model called admin user, and it's creating a new user, and it's creating sort of a default user. Admin at example.com with a very secure password of password. And so initially you could think, well, that's a bit of a security no-no, right? Because like, what if this ever got into the production site that you were running? But if you scroll all the way over, you can see that they've put a guard on the end of that line, so that default username and password will only ever be seeded into your application if Rails is running in development mode, which is how we're running it now. But if we were to put this into production on a server and you ran the seed script, that line would not run. So that's good. So we need to run that now. And so from the command line, we'll do a Rails DB seed and just rerun our seed script. We could also have just taken that line and we could have gone into the Rails console. So we could have run Rails C, and we could have interacted with that admin user model. Right here, we can see that there's our very first user in the admin model. And so we could have just run that ActiveAdmin create statement from the Rails console instead of seeding it. And now what we can do is we can go to our website. If we go to /rails/info, oops, what is it not liking here? Undefined method devise for admin user. Well, I put devise into my gem file and I restarted my server. So what don't you like about it? Okay, another restart was required at that point. I pulled up /rails/info because that gives us access to our routes. Again, this is something that's only enabled in development mode. People wouldn't see this on a deployed site. But you can see that there's a bunch of new routes that all start with /admin. And so these are routes that were added by way of ActiveAdmin. If we went to our routing file, that's in our config folder, we would see that ActiveAdmin has added some routes, some of its own routes. ActiveAdmin, just this line generates a bunch of ActiveAdmin required routes, and then a bunch of devised routes for admin login purposes. And so if we now go to /admin, we can log in using that very, very secure admin@example.com with a password of password. And we can say, remember me. This brings us to a administrative dashboard. The sort of look and feel of this dashboard is a little bit dated because this the design of it hasn't changed since ActiveAdmin was first launched. There are some gems that you can use that you can plug into your application that sort of take over the design and style it in a more modern way. So that's something some students do with their project. And you can see here, I already have access to administrative users, so I could go and I could, potentially even create a new administrative user here. So I could like make myself a username with my email address, and I could give myself a very secure password. And if I get the password confirmation wrong, it's going to tell me that the passwords don't match, that kind of stuff. There's also a comment table. And what this is ActiveAdmin has added a table to our system, which is called a polymorphic table. And what that means is it's a table that can have a foreign key relationship to any other table. So the ones that we've seen up to this point, we've had like a foreign key relationship to a specific table. With a polymorphic relationship, you can have, basically it stores a foreign key and it stores a reference to which table it is referencing. And that way we could, as administrators, leave comments on entries in any of our tables. So here's the admin user. There's a little comment area. I could say like, this user is a jerk. Something an admin might say behind the scenes about themselves. There you are. Currently, our other two models aren't available yet, but they will be in a moment. We have to do one more thing to get the horse model and the breed model available. Then we could also add comments to those. What we need to do to get those available is to run another generator. So I'm going to head over here. I'm also quickly just going to commit my changes. So I'll just say installed ActiveAdmin. So we have another generator, Rails generate ActiveAdmin resource. So here, oops, I will say Rails G for generate active_admin:resource. And then I just want to mention the model or models in 2 lines that I want to register. So I know I want the breed model, so I'm going to run that. And I want the horse model. And those each just add a single file into a new folder in our app subfolder. So there is now an admin folder inside of app, and we can see that there is a breeds.rb and a horses.rb in that folder. So I'm going to open those up. App admin, breeds, and horses. Close a few things down here. So one of the things we have to do with ActiveAdmin is we have to specify which of the model parameters we want to be editable by administrators. So we could whitelist some or all of our parameters to allow them to be edited. But you might have certain parameters that you don't even want administrators to edit, so you could leave off those columns if you wanted to. And ActiveAdmin has done a nice thing. It's sort of peeked into our tables or probably into our schema file, and it knows already what parameters a horse has and what parameters a breed has. So we just have to uncomment line 8. And I'll just actually remove the other comment, or yeah, all the other comments here. And then I'll do the same in the breeds RB. I will delete a bunch of comments, uncomment the one that says permit params, remembering that a breed simply had a name. That was the only custom parameter that a breed had, whereas a horse had a name, a foreign key to breed, an age, a top speed, and most importantly, the number of legs. So with that in place, everything's good to go. If I go back to my website, which is right here, and I reload this /admin, my menu up top now includes breeds and horses. I can click through. I can create a new breed if I want to. The glutton horse, of course. That creates it. I can comment on it with that polymorphic comments table. This is a funny name for a horse. And I also have access to my horses table, and I can edit existing horses. Oh no, this horse lost all of its legs except for one. There you go. And the neat thing is, it's aware, it being ActiveAdmin, of our associations, and so it knows that a horse belongs to a breed, so it's automatically built a form that has all of these possibilities, and for the breed, it's put a drop down, it's gone and queried the breeds table, pulled all the breeds and their primary keys, and made it so that we can associate a horse with a breed just by the drop down. So I can create a glutton horse named Wally, 2-year-old horse that runs really fast on 3 legs. And then it's successfully created. And that's all there is to the admin dashboard. As you add more models, you can register more resources with ActiveAdmin. You get more and more access to them here. Many-to-many associations are a little bit more complicated. ActiveAdmin is not as clever to figure those out. So if you have a many-to-many association, you don't automatically get a drop-down. I have a separate video that I recorded in a past term for that. Not every student needs that information, so I don't lecture on it in class, but I can send you out a link, all of you, to that video in case you have the need for that. And there also are marks for adding that kind of feature to your project, your e-commerce project. And so the next thing that I want to do is file uploads. Before I do that, does anyone have any questions about anything that we did up to this point to bring in this administrative dashboard? Good. Okay. So what I would like is I'd like to be able to, for each horse in the system, have an image associated with that horse and be able to, as an administrative user, add those when I create a new horse or add them when I update a horse. And also, from a user visiting the website, I want to be able to see that in these cards. Does anyone notice anything weird about my website? What has changed? The styling has changed, yes. So that's one thing we have to address before we get into file uploads, is the fact that ActiveAdmin puts both JavaScript and CSS assets into our asset pipeline that pollute the rest of our application. And so we need to do what's called vendoring, which is just moving those to a new folder, which Rails has support for, which I'm not sure why ActiveAdmin doesn't just put them there in the first place. But it's something that we have to do now. And so we're going to do that here at the command line. I will quickly just add and commit registered read and horse models with ActiveAdmin, ActiveAdmin. There is a vendor folder right off the root of our project. And in that vendor folder, I'm going to create a new folder called Assets. ASSETS. And inside of the Assets folder, I'm going to create two other folders. One called JavaScripts, plural, and the other one called Style Sheets, plural. And then we can either using a command line move, or we can just go to the to the Windows File Explorer. We need to move two files from another folder. So I'm going to use command line. I'm going to say move app/assets/JavaScripts. And notice I'm using autocomplete here with tab completion. And then I'm going to say AC for active, autocomplete that. That gets me the ActiveAdmin JavaScript file. And I want to move that to V for vendor /A for assets /J for JavaScripts. And just hitting tab after each one of those. So that'll move that JS file from the regular asset pipeline over to this vendored area. And I'm also going to do the same for the ActiveAdmin style sheet. So app assets style sheets, ActiveAdmin, is going to go into my vendor assets style sheets. And I'll show you two ways of doing this actually. We can use move, or we can be like more version control aware, and we can use git move. And so on the surface, those two things appear to do the same thing. But if I do a git status, you can see that the one that I used git move for, Git was actually aware that that file was moved. For the other one, Git only notices that it was deleted and that there are new untracked files in another folder. So I tend to like to use git move more when I move files around, just because I'm working with the version control system a little bit more. The commit log is going to tell a better story. And so here I'll just add those changes and commit them and just say vendored the JS and CSS assets of ActiveAdmin. And then once I do that, I'm not sure after this point if that ends up becoming the same thing in terms of version control. Because here you can see in the end, when I committed that, it did say that it considered both of those to be renames. So maybe it's clever enough that even though I didn't use git move here, in the end, it inferred that it was a move. I now need to restart my server because the assets have changed. But nothing should be different at this point. Nothing in terms of ActiveAdmin, something in terms of the rest of my website. The rest of my website should go back to looking normal. And so reloading the front end of the website back to looking normal, and yet the back end of the website looks like that. You'll hear me use the term front end and back end in this course, and I'm using them in the sort of the older sense of those words in terms of web development. These days, when people say backend and front end, they tend to mean like backend is the server and front end is like the client browser. Sort of in older web parlance, the front end was like the user-facing portion of your website, and the back end was like the administrative portion of the website. And so you might still hear people use front end and back end in that way. I'm trying to train myself to not use it, but I'm just so used to saying that. But these days, those terms mean very different things. They tend to refer to the server and the client. Okay, now I want to add file uploads, now that I've got that vendoring sorted out. In previous versions of Rails, we used a gem for this. There was a few different gems that I'd used over the years. One was called Paperclip. I used that one for a number of years. You can see it's now deprecated. I also used one called Carrier Wave. What's another one? I imagine this one will likely be deprecated, and the reason is that Rails has built into Rails, I don't know if it came in Rails 6 or in a late version of 5, but its own built-in version of dealing with file uploads, and that's something called ActiveStorage. So if I go to the guides here, no, that's not true. Why are you clicking in there? Okay. And I look for storage on this page. There's ActiveStorage. And it says this guide covers how to attach files to your active record models. ActiveStorage is really nice because anytime you're building a website where you're going to allow either a select group of administrative users, or even more worrisome, maybe all of your users, allow them to upload images, you're going to have to start thinking about where those images are being stored, and if you're potentially filling up a hard drive somewhere, right? If you are just doing file uploads in the style that we did in Web Development 2, where the files are just put onto the server in a particular folder, well, if you're running on a virtual private server and you have a fixed amount of disk space, you could eventually fill up your disk space. And then what do? Right? Well, you could pay for more disk space, but that's just a game where you're going to continually have to bump that up. So the solution these days is to store those images in a cloud file storage service, something like Google Cloud Platform or Amazon Web Services or Azure. I've used the AWS S3 service, which is this very, very cheap to store files and allow for downloads. You pay sort of fractions of pennies on like the storage that you store, and then you also pay both on upload and download of those files. But again, it's very, very cheap. And then you can never run out of space because these companies make money the more files you store with them. So they'll just allow you to continue to store more and more files. And so the nice thing with ActiveStorage is in development mode, we can store the files just directly to disk. And then we can go and tweak a few config files, put in a few API keys, and have the files stored to a service like S3 or Google Cloud or whatnot. So what do I want to do? Well, step one is I'm going to run a command here. Strangely, Rails decided not to do Rails generate this command, so it's just Rails space ActiveStorage install. So I'm going to go over here, Rails space active_storage : install. And that gets me a migration because there's going to be two tables that are going to be created. So not only are the files going to be stored locally to disk, at least in development mode, but references to those files are going to be stored in two different tables. And that way we don't actually add anything to, we're going to add the image to the horse model. We don't have to add any columns to the horses table all of the information is going to be stored within the ActiveStorage models and their tables. So I'm going to say RailsDB migrate to create those new tables. And I have now a table called ActiveStorage blobs and ActiveStorage attachments. And I will just add that to Git saying added ActiveStorage tables. And then following these instructions, I'll just scroll down past all the cloud service setup stuff. For the easiest of use cases, having a single file attached to a particular model, we have a has_one_attached method, and then what you want to call that thing. So in the example here, they have users with avatars, and avatars are probably going to be images, and so they have a user that has one attached avatar. Now the files that we upload don't have to be images, but there's sort of niceties around images, and we'll talk about how we can get ActiveStorage to automatically resize images for us on upload, which is really, really nice. But we're going to use this. There's also the option of doing has many attached. So if you want to have multiple images attached with a particular row in a database, you could do that. So let's do that. Has one attached. I'm going to go to my horse model. So in my app models folder, I'm going to open the horse.rb, and I'm just going to say has one attached space, and then I get to name what this thing is, and I'm just going to call it image. Has one attached image. This isn't a direct property of horse because it's not part of the horses table, but we saw earlier that when I wanted to allow administrative users to modify properties of a horse, we had to whitelist those. So I do have to return, even though it's not actually on my table, I do have to return to that file in the ActiveAdmin folder, the horses RB, and I'm going to have to do two things in this file. One, at the end of this list of permitted parameters, I have to add image. So I just put a comma and then :image. The other is a little bit more subtle, and if I go to the website itself, so here, I go to horses and I try to add a new horse. ActiveAdmin, again, isn't as clever as we might want it to be. It knows that a horse has a breed and a name and an age, but because image is not an actual property of a horse, it's not in the horses table, it doesn't know to add it here. And so we have to do some manual tweaking here. This form is auto-built for us, but if we go to the ActiveAdmin docs, we can see how to sort of take over that automatic creation of the form and make it ourselves. So there's this section in the docs that says customizing the form, and there's a section called default. And if I just copy and paste these lines here and put them into the ActiveAdmin block in the AppAdmin folder, like so, I'll just give ourselves a little bit more room here. This recreates what we already have. So this is going to give us a form that shows errors when there are errors, creates inputs for all of the attributes that our model has, and then creates the actions required for submitting and canceling, editing, or creation. We also now want to add something new. And so I'm going to go here and say f.inputs again, but I'm going to make it a block. So I'm going to put a do and an end. And then I'm going to say I want a input for the image, and I want it to be a file. And this little mini form builder language here, this isn't something that ActiveAdmin made. This is ActiveAdmin relying on yet another gem. And so again, this is how these sort of library ecosystems work. Every gem depends on other gems that then depend on other gems, or in the, in the node ecosystem, it's the npm packages that depend on other npm packages. So all of this here is done by something called Formtastic. It's Formtastic. And so when I wanted to figure out how to add this thing, I didn't go to the ActiveAdmin notes to figure out how to do this. I went to the Formtastic README on GitHub, and I looked up how one would go and add a file picker for a particular property. And then when I got that information, it just worked. So I can save this file. What we'll see now is at the top of the form is going to be all of our regular inputs grouped together, and then there's going to be a separate group just for the file picker right above the submit and the cancel button. So here's my new horse. Maybe I'll do an existing horse. There's the Wally Glutton horse. There's my file picker. I should now be able to browse, pick a file. Something a little glitchy with my Firefox in that it takes a while for it to register that I picked the file. And with the other section yesterday, I was always getting impatient and clicking update horse too soon, and then nothing was being attached. But now that we've waited for that to actually show up, I should be able to click this update horse here. And it says it was successfully updated. I don't see anything here. I could do more customization. Just like we customized our form, I could customize this show page to display maybe a thumbnail of the horse. I could customize this entire list to show little thumbnails of any of the horses that have images. I'll leave that as an exercise to you if you wish to do that. And then we're eventually also going to have to make this change on the front end over here, right? So that the image can be displayed in and amongst our, probably part of our card. But we should be able to see, at least in the server output, the upload happening. And so if I scroll back up here, this is, right here. This is where the magic happens. Started patch, this was me uploading the file. You can see that horse PNG file name is present there. You can see those tables that we added, like the ActiveStorage blobs and the ActiveStorage attachments, they're getting added to. We've got an uploaded file key, so all the right things are happening. So it gives me confidence to say, yes, this actually did do a proper upload. So I'm going to go to Git, and I'm just going to say commit added image attachment horse model. And now I can head over to the horse partial, because that's what we created for the displaying of horses. And so if I go to my views folder and I go to this horse partial in the horses subfolder, I should be able to go in here inside of my card, and I should be able to do a little test to say if the horse has an image which is present, then output a image tag for the horse image. And I'm going to make a quick trip in a second over to the Bulma site and just see what other markup I need to include around that to give this image the proper styling inside of a card. So I'll just quickly visit the Bulma site right now, and then I'll come back to my code to show you what it looks like in its entirety. So I'll go to documentation, I'll go to my components, and I'll go to card. There's an example of a card with an image here, and so I will take that example, and we'll see that. Oops. I'm going to, oh, I deleted something. Okay, that's fine. Gotta put back this image tag in there for the horse image. Then I'm going to close my figure, and I'm going to close that div. And I'm not sure that this image is a 4x3, so I'm going to take that class off here. So I've got a div with a class of card image, and then inside of it I've got a figure with a class of image, and then inside of that I'm outputting my image tag, which is going to be like an image src standard HTML thing. Image tag is aware of where this file actually was saved, so we don't need to know anything about the paths where it was saved. If we're using cloud file storage, we don't need to know like where it exists in the cloud. Image tag will just figure that all out for us and just put the proper URL in there, which is just really nice. And so with all of that in place, I should be able to go to my website here, somewhere here. And look at that, a horse. Now, probably not styled in the nicest way because I have my system set up such that these cards stretch when there's only one of them on the screen. That's fixed with a little bit of Bulma styling, but you can also see when there's no image attached, that's just fine. It doesn't break anything. And then the last thing I'm just going to show really quickly here, I'm just going to go to the repo for this and pull a little bit of code that I wrote yesterday after class. I'm going to go to the ActiveAdmin and then go to the DB seeds file. I'm going to grab these 3 lines and I'm going to put them in my seed file. So don't try to do this right now. I'm just going to try to do it quickly here. I'm going to say horse equals. This is where I'm creating these horses. And this is just a little bit of code that hopefully, if everything is working, it's going to take the name and the breed of the created horse. It's going to visit the Unsplash API. Unsplash is a website that provides free-to-use images. It's going to grab that image and it's going to attach that image to a horse. And then I have like a 1-second sleep just in case the API needs throttling. I'm not sure it really does. And then I'm going to dial down the number of breeds and horses that I actually want to work with here. So I'll just say like 4. And what this should do is for each of those horses, it should try to find an appropriate image of that horse with that particular name. Now, it's not going to be perfect. It'll not always find pictures of horses. The name might be more likely to find something. But let's give it a try. I'll do a Rails DB seed. The Rails DB seed will probably fail because I'm not removing that administrative user. So at the end of the DB seed, it'll give me a validation error saying I already have that email address being used. But that's okay as well. It'll take a second now, especially because I put that little 1-second sleep in there, because it's having to go and download image by image by image. There, it failed on the email like I thought it would. But if we head back to the website and I go to here, we've got horses. Check it out. And so Yeah, I thought that was a nice little addition. Again, making our seed script have actual sort of real world-ish data in it. It worked nicely here and actually pulled some horses because the word horse was in there. I imagine for this one, well, let's see. Yeah, no horses at all, but got images at least. So again, it's giving us some kind of real world data to work with in our application. So I'll send you a link to that final code, that seed script code with the API stuff in it, so that you could play around with that if you want as well. But that's basically all I wanted to present for today. The only other thing that I will just really quickly show you is if we peek into the config folder, there is a storage YAML file. YAML is just another markup language that's often used for config files. Here's where we are specifying that our current service for our local environment is the disk. We want to save files to disk. But if we wanted to switch over to Amazon or Google or Azure, it's just a matter of putting in credentials, putting in API keys, putting in credentials to specify. You'd uncomment those, and then you would go to the environment that you want to use. You could say in production for storage, I don't want to use the local storage. I want to use Amazon or Google Cloud or whatever. And I've used both. I've tried it out with Amazon Web Services and with Google Cloud, and it worked really nicely. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming to class today and watching me talk about active storage and ActiveAdmin and horses and all that fun stuff.